everyone, it's Shari here today, and I am going to be making this colorful rainbow wreath for the new year. So the large wreath die is actually one of my favorite dies to use. It's great for greenery and seaweed, and it's also great for making wreaths, and I like to make wreaths for any time of year. So I thought a rainbow wreath would be really pretty. And this is also a great way to use some scraps. So I've got all my colors picked out here. Some are scraps, some are not. I'm going to be using some guava and some chili pepper, some fake tan, some sugar plum, some blue jay, peacock, cilantro, and then sunflower for my yellow. So I have 8 colors. Each of these this die cuts out 4. I'm only going to be using 2 of each color, so I'll actually have some pieces left over to make some other wreaths. I'm going to be making a really large wreath, so I'm going to actually use one of the stitched circle frames, the second largest one in this set. It's slightly larger than the circle that comes with the large wreath die. I'm putting 2 together just for a little more stability. You can see there I've taken one and just kind of laid them out to figure out sort of the spacing. Those are not glued down to that ring. Those are just there sort of as a guide. I'm going to mark the 4 quadrants of my circle also as a guide. I honestly don't know how much I paid attention to it, but it's there regardless to kind of figure out where those go. So I'm just going to be putting some glue onto the circle and then laying each color down, 2 of the same color right beside each other. So it's going to make a very full rainbow wreath. In hindsight, I really wish I had put my dots of glue on the back of the colored pieces, because I did have a little bit of glue that kind of seeped out the edges, but lesson learned, that's the way I'll go about doing it next time. I just needed to make sure that I didn't touch the glue until it was dry. It'll dry clear and it's fine, and I'm actually going to cover up some of those little boo-boos with some embellishments, but either way, I kind of wish that I had done that. So I'm just working my way around, and I'm down to my last color. I did pretty good at my spacing, but I feel like there's a little bit of space between the green and the yellow, and some of these were too stuck down to adjust them, but I'm going to put my bow there, so it's going to be fine. We're going to kind of cover it up. So now for the major part of my sentiment, I am going to be white embossing the word joyful onto a piece of black cardstock. So I used my anti-static powder tool, and then I've stamped out the word in clear embossing ink, and I'll just use some white embossing powder to stick to it. This joyful is from the Mice on Ice set. So I'm actually making a non-holiday card using all holiday stamps and dies today. So once I've got enough of that embossing powder on there, I'm just going to tap off all the excess. And now I can use my heat tool to heat it up and melt it. I like to heat the back side of my cardstock just slightly first, just to kind of get it warm. I think it helps with warping. So once that's all melted, I can use the coordinating die to cut it out. And I really love the look of these dies. It's just like a nice bright sentiment with a black outline. So there is that nicely cut sentiment. So I've got the largest stitch square rectangle cut from white cardstock. I've put that in my MISTI. I'm going to use the We Wish You A and New Year from the offset Sayings Christmas. And I'm just lining this up. I've already put these on the MISTI. I'm just checking that they line up. One's above and one's below the word joyful, and they're going to fit in the center of the wreath. So I know that those are in the right place, and I'm just going to use some black licorice ink to stamp those onto this white square. So now that I have that sentiment stamped onto that square, I can glue down my wreath, and I'm just putting some glue along that circle. I'm just going to center it up in there, trying to put that gap that I had at the bottom. That's where that bow is going to go again. So the gap between the green and the yellow where I didn't have it quite even, I'm going to put that down there so my bow can cover that up. And then I can also add the die cut joyful to the center. And I like how this overlaps over onto the wreath as well. So for the bow, I thought a solid black bow would be perfect. It doesn't distract from the colors of the wreath, and it brings out the black of the sentiments. But before I stick that down, I'm going to add foam adhesive tape to the back of the square, and I'm going to adhere this whole thing to a 5x5 square card base that's white. I like the white on white, and that's also why I use the foam adhesive for some dimension to kind of separate the two white panels. So now I can add my bow, and I'm just using glue dots to adhere that down. The first one sort of folded up on me, so I'm actually going to add a second one. And once I have my bow in place, I can just use my scissors and trim off the ends. Trimming it once it's on the card is a good way to make sure that you trim them to the right length and they're not too short. So I wanted to attach some of these down a little bit more to my card because they are only attached to that circle frame. And so I'm just adding some tiny dots of glue underneath and tacking those down a little bit, especially the ones that were sticking up a bit much, just so they don't get caught on an envelope or anything else and tear that on the card. And then finally, I'm adding some iridescent sequins in 2 different sizes. And I'm just kind of sprinkled them around the wreath where I want them. Then I'm going back through and picking each one up with my tweezers and adding a small dot of glue underneath. This is a good way to fill in and cover up any mistakes you may have. And it also adds some really great shine and interest to the card. So there is a look at the finished card. I just like the shininess of those sequins, but yet they don't cover up the colors of the wreath. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day and a Happy New Year. Bye.